actually genuinely harboring racial hatred is bad. I think it's good as a society we move past that. I think it's good as a society we move past a lot of prejudice. If another group has power over you, there's like an inherent suspicion, because it's like, well, this guy's not really looking out for me because he doesn't look like me and he didn't come from where I came from and he's not like me. And the problem with this is after there's so much conflict, the non-whites don't trust whites, and the whites are rightly skeptical of the non-whites because the non-whites seem to have license to hate whites. Non-whites have like inherent distrust, basically like a veiled hatred and resentment, and they feel completely able to express that. And so the fundamental question is, how now do the races share power in a way that isn't contentious? How do we find an understanding? And I don't know if that's even possible, because the concern from the alt-right was always, in particular in a democracy, in an open society, when politics gets racialized, it basically just becomes like a race war. Yeah. It turns into like a soft form of a racial war. And, now they're saying woke right. I think the reason they're doing that, and they want to, just kind of get rid of identity politics and find a consensus, is because they want for the whites now not to fight the non-whites. They want a situation where, like you said, we're going to have happy liberal whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians all living together. I just don't know how possible that is at this point. And that's where people start to talk about, can we disintegrate? We were forcibly integrated with immigration and after the Civil Rights Act. Can we now go our separate ways? I don't know that that's actually even a good thing, though. I don't know that that's even like a good answer. But I would say where it starts is just with honesty. Ultimately, there's got to be a recognition that there are legitimate grievances on both sides, and there are illegitimate grievances.
Right.
There are legitimate voices expressing those grievances that actually, because I said this on the Charlie Kirk show, after Charlie got shot, I think there was a real threat of like war. I think there still is, because left-wingers are shooting people and blowing stuff up, and eventually a right-winger is going to retaliate, and then is it going to be like the 60s and 70s? That's a question. But I said on my show after Charlie died, the important thing is, let's get a new consensus of people that don't want that, that don't want war, that don't want their opponents to die, that don't want to murder each other. I said, I'm Christian. I don't believe in murder. I don't believe in revenge. I said, and not all people are Christian, and not all Christians believe that, actually. And so I think moving forward, there needs to be an uncomfortable coming together of people that have grievances, legitimate grievances with each other, but who both want harmony, want to live in peace, don't want bloodshed, leaders from both sides to come together. But I'm not optimistic. I think that the most cynical, calculating people rise to the top. They will incite and exploit the divisions and try to vie for control. And I think, conflict is more likely than peace at this point.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard to keep those, because it's so easy. It's so easy, And by the way, just because you mentioned it, and I did say this publicly a bunch, but I really did appreciate your episode after Charlie Kirk. Thank you for that. So it was. It reminds. I was on Piers Morgan debating that Brandon Tatum, the cop guy, and that was what he was. He said, I was a terrible person for giving you credit for that show. And then his whole argument was like, he's like, Nick is disingenuous. Like, he doesn't mean that. And it's just like, whatever. I didn't even like spend that much time on it in the thing, but it was just funny. It was like in my head, I was like, wait, so in your worldview, like Nick is this disingenuous, he's the leading neo-Nazi. It's like, okay, so the leading neo-Nazi is calling for peace? Like, is that not, could we at least acknowledge that's preferable to like the other outcome? But on the broader topic, I agree with your assessment, unfortunately, that it's kind of less likely that this has a positive outcome than a negative one. But I do think that, I look at it like I was born in 1983, which, to me does not feel like that long ago. I still feel like you, man, except my knees. My knees really don't feel like you. But, so I was born in 1983. This is 20 years, less than 20 years, 19 years after the Civil Rights Act, right? So it's like, it kind of does make sense in a way that perhaps there was like a different outlook only 20 years after the Civil Rights, and now it's 2025. Like, this is actually quite a bit further. This is 60 years after the Civil Rights Act now. And I do think that, like, in order to move forward, the only way to do this would be to declare, and man, I hate saying this word, but actual equality of some sense. Like it would actually have to be like, look, nobody's getting discriminated against under the law. Either nobody has a right to have their special, their group interest, their group idea, or everybody gets to do it. Now, like I think the way it worked, like when I was a kid, it's almost like there was a gentleman's agreement. Like, and there was a gentleman's agreement where it was kind of like, look, we know like bad things happened to minorities in this country in the past. And so we're not going to say, like some of the things that we obviously know. And we'll even allow you to say a little bit about us. And that was kind of the gentleman's agreement. And at a certain point, it was like the progressive left particularly just broke this gentleman's agreement. And they were like, well, no, we're going to say everything that we want to say. And then eventually I feel like, the young white men were kind of like, okay, well then screw it. So then there's no gentleman's agreement anymore. Right. And, I remember, I remember, I'm sure you saw this when Scott Adams had that comment a couple years ago, I guess it was, that went super viral. Scott Adams, who's unfortunately is, I think, very sick these days. Me and him have argued a few times on Twitter, but I was sad to hear that. But he said the thing, he was like, my advice to white people is just don't be around blacks. Like, just move away, move to a different neighborhood where they're not there. And I remember first hearing that and going like, yo, that's fucked up, dude. Yeah. And then like the second after I went, oh, that's fucked up, I went, this is exactly what I did. That is exactly what I did. I mean, I remember me and my wife were looking at the town that we ultimately moved to, and it's just like there was like a grading thing, when you look at towns and they're like schools, A+, like this, A+, this, A+, crime, A+, this, A+, and they go diversity, D-. And I was like, cool. Like, and it's not like I don't care, but it's like those other things are important to me. Right. They do seem to be attached to this one. And so it's like, I think in order to kind of put this fire out, there would have to be some type of system where it's like, look, like white people are they can't be discriminated against under the law, and they can't be discriminated against in other ways either. And they have to also be allowed to say what they want to say. And to your point, there are legitimate grievances that black people have. I mean, there is this is my own bias, I guess, but much of it doing with government policy. Almost everything that's handed to them from the state is absolute garbage, and their schools are really bad, and there's like legitimate grievances there. I also think like welfare has done enormous damage, but you kind of can't just blame all your problems on white people and racism. I mean, that actually is not really what's holding black people back in this country, and I think we have to be honest about that if we don't want things to go in an ugly direction.
Yeah, well, and I would say that a lot of what occurred under wokeism, I don't think it was all bad necessarily, because I think that, as I get older, I do recognize it's sort of funny. Like when I was a teenager, we were getting called racist for everything. Everything was racist, everything. And I feel like a lot of people started out saying, how's that racist? I remember used to, like you said earlier, if you called them black and not African-American. Right. In like 2012, that was a problem. Or colored instead of person of color, whatever. And he'd say, I don't hate anybody for their race. I feel like people have kind of gone full circle. And now 10 years later, people are like, they actually hate non-white people and go, yeah, I'm racist, so what? And I don't know, I feel like maybe that's a mistake in a sense. I mean, I've said I'm racist, but like actually genuinely harboring racial hatred is bad. I think it's good as a society we move past that. I think it's good as a society we move past a lot of prejudice. And I think I agree that the new consensus just needs to be, just like you said, that basic conception of fairness, equality. And it really comes down to specificity with the language. Like everyone now talks about, are you racist? Are you not racist? I say, yeah, I'm a little racist. I think everyone's a little racist. Yeah, we're all a little prejudiced, and we all believe in stereotypes. And what does that even really mean? But do I believe in cruelty? Hatred, violence? No. And I usually like to use those words because anyone who knows me, the number one racist, knows I'm not a cruel person. I'm not a hateful person. I'm not a violent person. Unless I'm put in a self-defense situation in my front door, let's say, because that is,
forgot about that.
Tends to happen, and I think that as a country, we could survive being racist. We can't survive like ontologically hating each other and not wanting the best for each other and wanting to kill and destroy each other. And that's why I think it's really important. It's like I said after that show, like we are going to need to fight. I do believe there is going to need to be like an intense political battle, and people are going to need to choose what side they're going to be on. And what side I'm not on is the side where someone gets shot in the neck and you celebrate, or someone gets stabbed in the neck with a knife and you make excuses for it. Or even in Gaza, people are being blown to smithereens and you say, give them hell, they deserve it, whatever. It's like we need to find a way where, and I'm Christian, of course, but we need to take most of the right and some of the left even against the kind of nihilistic element on the far left, because I really believe they are the problem. I think they are driving a lot of the issues here.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I do agree with you that there was something, you know, it was one of those examples that really pushes you up to the limit of like speech versus inciting violence. But like there is something like dude, there was just a major political assassination. This is a dangerous moment for this country, and you're just making a video about how great it was, and I 100% agreed with your take. I think it was on Greenwald or Patrick Bet David, one of those two shows, where you were just like, yeah, they should get fired from their job. And like, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. There is a level, and yes, you do have to you have to work out your own hierarchy of moral outrages or whatever. But again, it's sometimes these things are somewhat arbitrary. I shouldn't even say, or I guess exactly where you draw the line feels kind of arbitrary, you know, in the same way, like we all know, like, okay, a 6-year-old can't drive a car, but a 25-year-old has to be able to, like, I don't know, there's somewhere you got to draw the line. And like, if a woman is getting fired for posting all lives matter, that's insane. But like, if you're getting fired for, it's like, I don't know. You know, I had a buddy of mine, who made he got fired from his job because he made a video singing Kanye West's Heil Hitler song, and it was like, well, yeah, dude, you know, like, I don't know, yeah, a lot of employers are gonna look at that and be like, yeah, dude, I can't have people doing that, and that's not nearly as bad as celebrating someone who just got murdered. By the way, I know you're friends with Kanye. Gotta say, dude, Kanye's album College Dropout spoke to my soul. It was the year I dropped out of college. He made this album, College Dropout. And I always loved, there's this one really beautiful song on there called Family Business. And I heard it earlier today. And man, it hits different after Cousins. The whole story is about his cousin. And I always thought it was such a nice song. But after Cousins, you're like, man, this one has a whole different tone to it. Anyway,